Pam's got it. If she doesn't, it's her problem.
Yeah, I've read these, yeah.
I didn't see it.
We will now move into deliberations guided by our MASB team.
Well, here's how I'd like to start, kind of just setting the context, and especially for those folks that are watching at home, right? So you've completed second round interviews with 2 candidates this evening that included presentations that included actual evidence and artifacts related to their view of how they've been able to impact student achievement. And then you took a break and we got the rest of the stakeholder feedback forms in and distributed to each of you, and then you took the time to review those. Now, just so that those folks who participated in some of those sessions today realize that any of those that were turned in earlier were sent to you earlier, so many of you had the opportunity to kind of go through those throughout the day, so you didn't necessarily have to do all of them tonight. So what I would like to do now is let's debrief on each of our conversations and the candidates that we had those conversations with tonight. Now, but what we need to be talking about is the fullness of their candidacy, not just tonight's performance. You know, you heard me say that before. You did some homework over the last week as well, where you made some phone calls. So this would also be an appropriate time if something came up in those conversations that you felt warranted sharing with your fellow board members, then you would do that in this deliberation. You would, however, not include names of the folks that you talked to, because that would be problematic, as you can imagine. And also, I would just kind of have you think strategically as you frame your comments. When we can, I mean, I want you to speak candidly, but I also realize that these folks have jobs that they are holding down, and they have to be able to hold their heads up and go back to work tomorrow too, so we want to be respectful of how we frame our comments when we're discussing them. So that said, why don't we start with our first candidate of the evening, who is Dr. Bob Herrera. Do you have a question?
I do. Currently, it's about 10:40-ish right now. 9:40 for you, Richard. I know you're an hour behind. I would like to, so that we're not exhausted, you know, I personally don't want to go till 1 o'clock in the morning or something along those lines. This is a very important decision, and I want to make sure that as we make this decision, we have an opportunity to think about it and go from that point. So I'd like to propose maybe a stop point if, you know, we don't have a candidate this evening where we can say, okay, we've had some good deliberations, maybe we, you know, think about it a little more and come back at another time if we get to that point. I just don't want this to go on through all hours of the night. Just a suggestion.
Did you have something to say?
I mean, I think it's a good suggestion, but I think that you guys would lead us in that direction. I'm sure you'd get to a point where you can appreciate whether we're going to get somewhere tonight or not based on your experience. So I hope that that would, you know, your facilitation of this process would get us there anyway.
And as a general frame of reference, where that happens is when folks dig trenches, right? And it's not still kind of an authentic deliberation, and that doesn't serve any of us well. So we would definitely take a look at what our next steps are at that point in time, if that's the case.
Perfect. I just wanted to bring that up before we started
that.
Going down the
It's like I tell my kids, nothing good happens after midnight, right?
Or 10:30 at our age.
What do you mean our age? No, I'm just
I
kidding.
was more so referring to Angie. I mean,
Yeah,
nope,
what do you mean by our age?
You're talking about me.
You're just waking up, Zach.
That's true. He's hitting his stride. Okay, so that aside, a couple other things I want to point out too is you don't all have to speak. Just know that. Like, I don't need to go down the row. It's more about, hey, you know, when you think about those selection criteria that you established at the beginning of this process and what you said was important and what may have become more apparent, right? The farther that you leaned into this process, right? What stood out for you as far as a potential asset for the district, and what reservations might you have just about fit or qualifications? Okay.
Can I just, Mr. Muckamel, are you with us?
I am.
Okay, just want to make sure we're all good.
So I would open the floor to feedback on Dr. Bob Herrera.
Mr. Rich?
Sure. So I was able to both reach out to the references provided by MASB, and actually just coincidentally spent some time in Benton Harbor with family over the holiday weekend. And so, I heard a lot of things. It's a smaller community, so people know that Farmington Public Schools is looking at potentially hiring him, and both with the reference and what I've heard from people is, we just don't want to see him go. When talking with the reference I was provided, heard about his detailed work, very systematic, and how he's able to bring in the right people to get a certain job done.
Thank you.
Mrs. Cummings?
I, too, was able to reach out to the reference provided by MASB and heard nothing but wonderful comments, that his management style is calm. He's never seen him angry or upset, that he works through issues thoughtfully, that he's very approachable. When I asked what are the 3 strongest qualities, it was leadership style, knowledge, wisdom, school improvement, and administration. He has the, quote, best understanding of improvement, understanding of the whole student, child, and ability to communicate and share knowledge. So what really struck me is the communication skills, the listening, and the sharing of information. Again, I could go on and on. Bottom up, and that's something that I saw in at least one of the feedback forms that I read from today, is that Dr. Herrera works on building consensus from bottom up. That's something I heard consistently through that discussion, was that ability, again, to communicate and build consensus.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Guess to echo Jessica and Zach's comments regarding Dr. Herrera, I heard the same things. He likes to build people up, building systems, conflict resolution, and references were very good. Ability to problem solve, quick turnaround, and the ability to remain neutral was, excuse me, mentioned as well. I liked his interview. Am I talk about that now?
Absolutely.
Sure. One thing that I noticed in his interview, he was very systematic. He talked about, getting people in places, and that was one of the things I heard from the interview, or from the reference check, that there were things that he started in, like the high schools, that actually were so good they started working in the secondary schools. But the thing he said that I really appreciated was he's going to do what's right, and he's going to put a system in place, and if he doesn't have the political capital, he's still going to do what he feels is right. And if he loses his job as a result of that, he will walk away with his head, hung high. And that really resonated with me. It just shows that he's got character and is not trying to pass the buck. So that was very impressive. So.
Mr. Muckamal, did you want to add anything?
No, I would agree with the comments that have been made.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oops, I'm sorry.
I'll just, for the
You gotta
benefit.
throw it at me.
Right, no. For
Sorry, Ms.
for the
James.
benefit of everyone, each one of us was given a list of folks to go and do reference checks on for both candidates. And I have nothing to add because both of the reference checks that I performed for both candidates came out great. They had great things to say about both candidates. So I didn't want to go into any detail. It's just much of the same of what you found.
I will just add as well as besides doing the reference check, we have had many people from the community and so forth reach out to us as well in addition to reference checks. I just think we have really been inundated with feedback on both candidates. I should
In
say.
the age of information, it's readily
Oh, boy.
shared, for sure. No doubt about that. Okay, without I don't see anybody else kind of wanting to comment further, so we'll shift gears now, and let's just hear your perspectives on our second interview of the evening, Dr. Shivers.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
I'm gonna have you
Go ahead.
get acknowledgement.
Mrs. Weems?
As part of that last discussion, were we just talking about references, or were we also talking about all of the feedback that we got from?
The fullness of their candidacy.
Okay, then
Okay, gotcha.
I think I was remiss because I would have addressed some of that.
All right,
as
well,
well.
let's do that
Can we
then.
step back one
Sure,
second?
sure.
Okay, because I didn't do that. Okay.
I didn't either.
Did you want to go ahead and start with that first?
We got an overwhelming amount of feedback from this morning when the candidates were going to visit with various folks from the district and parents and community members. And so there are at least, I want to say 60 feedback forms that I've received on each candidate just from that process. And I overwhelmingly positive, mostly. It seemed just from the reaction, I couldn't tell which group was which, but I get the sense that there are folks that they had really great things to say about both candidates, not a ton of negative, except that, just a wondering whether they're a good fit for this district. And then in terms of other community feedback, after the interviews, we probably got about a dozen or so additional pieces of feedback on each candidate, and we spent our break time reviewing those as well, and very similar feedback. A lot of people were interested in more specific data and examples about how to achieve and move the needle on student achievement. That was kind of a common theme.
Okay, so also the feedback sheets, it was very positive overall as far as very intelligent, very knowledgeable about education and the system of educating students. Questions and concerns related to personality as far as interactions and relatability within our system, moving to a larger system. And again, would it be a good fit? Some of the feedback I read as well was that questions asked were not answered with great detail, was more of a surface level than the detail. So the wonderings were left with, what does that mean? Yes. I'm sorry, I said yes.
It's okay, it's
Mrs.
late.
Smith,
You
I'm
probably
sorry,
don't even
I am
remember my
tired.
name, it's okay. I don't remember my name.
Age.
The feedback that I received, as all of my colleagues stated, was very positive, extremely positive. Dr. Shivers,
No, don't go there yet, we're still on Herrera.
oh, okay, we're still on Dr. Herrera. Dr. Herrera's reference spoke volumes. He does know how to go into a community where there's no one there to actually help him to get everything together. But then once he got there, he was able to work collaboratively with the staff, his cabinet, he was able to take on a lot of things that was really just flatlined and was able to give it some life, a life support. The reference couldn't speak anything but positive feedback on how he works with the community, his staff, and he has a diverse staff, and those teachers just praise him, and they just really don't want to see him go. That's the feedback that I got.
Mrs. Cummings.
I think this is more of a note. It's interesting that in the feedback forms, there is a lot of very positive feedback, and I'd say the concerns are, some of it might be more nerves, especially just meeting someone for the first time and trying to picture, can this person fit? And so I find it very interesting that I think most of us have had the same discussion with the reference checks. When I got from mine and what I'm hearing from you is that his references really do seem to stress his ability to connect and communicate and collaborate, which I think from the feedback forms is for some maybe not evident right away, but that was, it seems to be something very consistent that we're hearing about Dr. Herrera.
I agree.
Let me be clear, that he is a communicator and can collaborate. That's something I think that has been consistent.
Mr. Rich.
I just need to echo that, and I think the only thing that we're hearing a lot of on the negative is fit. Whether or not it's personality, whether or not it's the not necessarily needing a build up from the bottom, but more of a direct something that's already built in a different direction possibly, to even just looking at the size difference and the difference in the kind of community Farmington is to South Haven or Benton Harbor.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
I just want to make sure we keep in mind what we're hiring a superintendent to do. Personality is a part of it. But again, we need somebody that can get the job done. And this is to both candidates. I know I'm not into the second one yet, but I just want to make sure we focus on that. I mean, we've got Dr. Heisch, who's a very charismatic individual. We've got other people who can get jobs done that may not be as charismatic, and I just want to make sure we keep that in mind as we go through this process, that, make sure we're hiring the person to do the job, not to be necessarily a personality. So.
Moving forward.
So we'll switch gears now. Whole list of Dr. Shiver's candidacy, including her conversation with you all tonight, any reference checking that you did, and other information that you may have taken.
Mrs. Smith.
A succession plan from the other candidate. I like the fact that he did say he could make it where if he had to leave, his district could move forward. And from talking, her reference was extremely moved, actually crying, because they're not ready for this transition to take place. Apparently, she is well loved in her community, and it was a shock for her to apply. She's done a lot of great things for that community and power-driven. My only concern was when I asked could she be a team player, it was said no, she can be a team leader. And you have to be able to be a team player to lead. And that's a concern. But I guess what was what moved me was that she's so well loved in that community that to talk to a reference that just breaks down and cries and does not want this individual to leave, that spoke volumes that, you know, how much she's done. That's pretty much it for me for that one.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Excellent candidate. I mean, she's very good. Her references were spot on. Nothing but good things to say. Couple of comments. You know, she does not sweep things under the table. She's the best at handling conflict that the reference has ever seen. Open to suggestions, gets things done. I see that this is not the time to compare at this point, correct?
It's probably a little early for that, but it won't be long, so hang
Okay.
tight. What do you
Okay.
guys think? Are you ready for that? No, let's
Let's get through.
Very, you know, good interview. A lot of one-on-one, like she mentioned in her interview. You know, seems like she gets her hands dirty at the lowest levels, dirty in a good way, obviously. So, again, just another good candidate.
Thank you.
Mrs. Weems?
Address that in reading the, 60-plus pieces of feedback that we received from interactions within our district today, it was overwhelmingly positive. People connected with her a lot more, it seemed to me. Just in rereading some of the comments, that came across pretty strong to me. What also came across was hesitancy around, being able to move into a larger district, some of that, but in terms of fit, it seemed like people thought personality-wise that it was a good fit. One of the things that sort of stood out to me was the data piece, and it was helpful for her to go through. She went through her presentation rather quickly and succinctly, which I appreciated. And she was able to explain the rationale behind some of the data, which was great, but at the same time, we're looking to go from good to great. And I'm looking for a candidate who has that type of experience. We're getting into I won't get into the comparison piece of it, but that did come across a little bit in just my overall thoughts around Dr. Shivers.
Mrs. Cummings?
So when I spoke with the reference that I contacted, this reference had, of course, very very wonderful things to say. That she is a servant leader, that she understands the importance of the work and it's not about her, that she's a connector, that and that makes her effective. And I think that's part of what we're hearing in the feedback that we've looked at from everyone that submitted feedback today. Also, the reference indicated that she doesn't micromanage. She has high expectations, and she works to connect, and that she's a quote, multiplier versus a diminisher. Team player, takes the lead, but relies on the team and is social by nature. So I think a lot of that is consistent with the feedback that we're hearing. And again, just very positive things to say about the candidate.
Mr. Muckamal, do you have anything to add?
No, just want to point out that because of my travel schedule, I wasn't reach out to the references.
And
So,
just so you know, both Mrs. Smith and I both contacted the references multiple times with no response for Dr. Shivers. So that was covered for you.
oh,
So you're okay, Mr. Muckamal, I'll share that, other than there was no feedback on that.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Rich?
The reference that I was given, I called a couple times and never received a response. I think one thing that stood out a little bit is actually from the first round interviews with which facets of the job do you prefer to take yourself versus delegate to others. And I think one thing that stood out was that Dr. Shivers would do everything. And that's definitely great when you have someone who can do that. But at the same time, in a larger district, that's just not feasible. And needing to recognize that is extremely important. And so that's just something I wanted to caution on a little bit. And just as I said from the feedback I'd heard previously, as I said when we whittled down from 7 candidates to 2, there have been comments of being more aggressive in making decisions, and the word bulldozer was used in decisions, especially when things weren't going her way.
Mrs. Smith?
I also felt that she is a stickler for policy and procedure, and that's a good thing. That policy, there is no gray area. She's really into policy and procedure. But I, too, received the same feedback that Mr. Rich received. The word wasn't used, bulldozer, but it was but it was in the same reference.
So in the reference check that I did, asked was, how does the candidate perform with regard to diversity? And the response was honor, but no depth of what does that mean and what would that look like. I think we got a few more answers tonight in regards to that. One of the things that came through in the stakeholder feedback very clearly was A, data concerns, B, that there were many, many job changes, and the concern of moving from a small system to the large system, and how would that acclimation occur again. Again, I see a strong candidate, wealth of information, definitely a variety of innovative programs and opportunities that she has brought to Redford, as well as Washington ISD. But I was trying to think here what's.
So I would like to, you guys have had access to some information that the public didn't have in fullness, right? Even getting the presentations ahead of time and some of the supplementary material. And knowing that some of the feedback forms that we saw said things like, well, I question, their performance as it relates to student achievement or their data. So I just have a sincere question, which is, did the presentations from both candidates and the related supplementary materials satisfy your questions regarding both of the candidates' ability to improve student outcomes?
Just so,
Mr. Johnson?
thank you, I'm sorry, Pam.
You're fine.
Just so everybody's on the same page with me, I was not here for the first round of interviews. I could make one night, but not the second night, and I wanted to be fair to all candidates, so I did not watch either of their interviews, and I did that purposely. So this was my first look at both candidates tonight. And the information I received and what I basically was hearing in the community and other things, it satisfied everything that I was looking for, and I was able to answer questions I think that the community would want to know. So I just want to put that out there that I could have gone back and looked, but since that round was over, this was literally a fresh start for both candidates for me. So I walked in with no bias. I didn't know what, I saw what Dr. Herrera looked like because I saw a picture of him somewhere.
On this
In his
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Correct, prior to. I had no idea that Dr. Shivers was, other than a female, I knew nothing else about her, and I, so this is my first time seeing both of them tonight.
Thank you.
Mrs. Williams?
So, in short answer to your question, it was helpful to get those presentations and to have them present to us because it helped me understand how they look at data, what data is important to them, how responsive they could be to questions in the future. All of that stuff was really, really helpful, and it helped me understand what was going on in their district, because one of the first things that I did when I was doing my research on these folks was, what does their district look like? And, I'm going off of information that's on the website, and as we all know, that's not really an entirely true picture of what's going on in a district. So I wanted to understand more about what's going on in their district. What it didn't do for me was help me understand how they intended to use data here, and how they intended to specifically help Farmington Public Schools move from good to great, which is what we're trying to do. That part of it was not there for me, but I didn't specify that, but that was part of what I was also looking for.
Mr. Rich?
I think we saw two very different kinds of presentations tonight, especially when it comes to data. Looking at Dr. Herrera's, it was a lengthier discussion of not as much depth into the data. And I think what we saw with Dr. Shivers, including all the supplemental information, was here is all the data, here is everything that you might need and more, and then nitpicking certain things. And we saw that even with the presentation, submitting a bunch of slides and then going to just a couple of them or skipping around. And I think the answer is yes, that it answered it in two very different ways, and then also provided insight in other ways, just into how they present data and how they analyze it and then present it.
Mrs. Cummings?
My answer is yes. I got what I was looking for in the presentations. And I also want to speak to Ms. Weems' comment about kind of moving the district from good to great. And as you mentioned, you can go on a website and only get so much information. So I also want to be fair to the candidates that today was most likely their first day exposed to many different stakeholders and gathering that information, and probably didn't have a whole lot of time to digest all of that information that they took in. And then there's the data, right? And I know we have it, it's here. It just needs to be accessed, and then that the dive needs to happen, and that that takes time and energy, of course, which I would expect that to happen. I just wouldn't expect a candidate to be able to do that for a second round interview.
Mr. Monkmel, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that, they had different approaches to presenting the information. I thought they're both thorough in their presentations, and obviously very different styles of presentation, and we're emphasizing different things. I think overall, what I would have prefer to have was simply more years of evidence, which we really don't. So, but that is what it is. So we only have 2 or 3 years of data.
So that's the other thing that because there's just a couple of points that I wanted to just, clarify. So in really for the public's perspective. So you guys had greater exposure to data and seemed to have felt pretty satisfied in that area. The other issue that we saw was this idea of, in feedback on both of them in the forums, was like questions about they haven't been someplace very long. And so I want to point out just a reality that occurs outside of Farmington, apparently. Which
Because
is,
they love us, they want to stay.
well, yes and no. But my point is, when you look at the career trajectory of both of those candidates, those were moves that were increasing responsibilities, positive moves. There were no like, hey, you screwed up, you're going down a notch or two. That's not the case of what you saw. So, and it also wasn't like overt job hopping either, right? In either case, so there was some rationale for those transitions. I point that out just to say, to your staff or the public, they may not know that. If they don't look at resumes all the time for, superintendent vacancies, they may not know that. So, what I hear from you at this point is kind of like, well, this becomes about, some of the comparative stuff that you mentioned when we're ready to talk about that, and I think we are. And also about this very nebulous thing here in Farmington that's related to fit. And I struggled even thinking about coming, because one of the issues is that there's no perfect solution here. I said before, your standards are very, very high. I am not suggesting you should lower your standards. I am saying, though, that there's some aspect of reality in here that you've got to get your arms around, regardless of what the course is. And what I mean by that is, I understand that everybody has this fantastic ideal of who your next leader is. The irony is there is not consensus, even in your stakeholders. And I don't even mean among the candidates. I've had people talk to me about your past superintendents here that made me blush, and that takes quite a bit. And what I mean by that is just such huge differences in opinions about who knocked it out of the park in Farmington and who was awful in Farmington. And so you can imagine as searchers that the mark is pretty tough here as far as, what are we aiming at? So let's hear it, folks.
Oh, boy.
What are you thinking?
What are you looking at me for?
Should we?
She just wants you to give some comparison on what you're thinking. Mr. Johnson.
Off of what you said, I think this community really needs to have like you said, a reality check. We are not the district we were 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Things have changed. Do we want to get back to that? I hear Ms. Weems saying going from good to great, or I should say good back to great, where we were one of the top districts in Oakland County. To me, that's extremely important. There has been a dip. Excuse me. There has been a dip, and there is no perfect candidate. You and I have had these discussions offline. I think that realistically, Dr. Herrera would probably do a better job, simply because, to me, of his experiences. It's not a simple choice. I don't want people to think that, there's definitely a cut and dry answer here. I think either one of them would do well. The difference is, I think Dr. Herrera would build an organization I think that's been pointed out in his references and even his interviews. You know, systems and processes that he would put in place. I think Dr. Shivers has done some great things, but I think, you know, I don't know, we have great, she made a comment about teachers leaving the district, you know, because of seasoning, as she called it. I didn't hear in her presentation the seasoning of folks at, let's say, central office or the building of leaders or, you know, things along those lines. And this is not a knock against Dr. Heisch by any stretch. I can't see Dr. Heisch going into a school, spending, you know, 15 minutes with each employee. And quite honestly, I don't know that I would want him doing that. I think a superintendent should manage the big picture and, you know, put people in place and build systems so that those things actually can work. And as he being Dr. Herrera said, you know, he talked about I believe Ms. Smith asked a question regarding a transition plan. That means a lot to me. So that right now, that's probably where I'm kind of leaning at this point.
Mrs. Smith?
I love the fact that Dr. Herrera had the compassion for the data. And whereas, well, both candidates gave us some great feedback, but you had one that had a passion and talked more about data than he did the community. And then you had the other talk around the data and talk about what was done in the community, which 21 years ago, I sat on the 3 pillars, and she showed that she could bring that back in. But I also agree with Ms. Weems. I've been in this community 21 years, and I would like to see us go from good to great again. And I know I'm not supposed to really use analogies, but just because I purchased the home and it doesn't have the furniture in it does not mean I have to put furniture in that home. I want to make sure that if I do purchase that furniture is durable. It will last. It will last more than 1 year, last more than 2 years. Is it able to hold? Will it be strong? Is it durable for pets? Is it durable for guests? And that's not what I'm feeling with these candidates. I mean, you have one candidate that had just put her hat in the ring because she was asked. And I want you to be here because that's what you want to be, not because you were asked to come here. So that's where I'm at right now.
Mrs. Cummings, I'm trying to look for the sign.
I think in all fairness, I understand what Ms. Smith is saying, but the amount of effort and energy that these applicants have to put into the process shows me that they do want to be here. That's what I read into it. So I'll just leave that where it is. I appreciate what I perceive as Dr. Herrera's ability to build consensus. We've heard over and over from the bottom up. I think that's important. I think it's critical in our system right now. That's a concern that I hear is about culture. We heard it from or at least one candidate this evening, but also think in some of our earlier work, a workshop that we had, I mean, this is feedback that we're hearing from stakeholders. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on communication and consensus building and collaboration. I think Dr. Herrera appears to have a lot of experience in that area. Moving from good to great, I mean, that's, I think, a concern that we all have. That's a goal that we all have. One thing that appeals to me about Dr. Herrera is he talked about goals and about addressing concerns, you know, making a goal, coming up with a plan, and moving forward. And again, I think it goes to that the process, right? Process, procedure. I also appreciate some of the data that he shared about improvement, student achievement improvement. Now, Dr. Shivers, I also greatly appreciate what she brings to the table. If I haven't said it already, I'll say it now. Both candidates have, I think, great qualities. And I think Mr. Johnson mentioned that both would work well, and I do get that sense that I think both are capable and highly intelligent individuals. When they're speaking, they know what they're talking about. They strike me as experts in the area, in the field of education. I do appreciate Dr. Shivers' apparent ability to really connect, and appears to connect very quickly with stakeholders. So, you know, they both have, I think, great qualities. I'm a little conflicted, if you can't tell, so I will say that. I do, I think Dr. Herrera would be someone who could move us forward sooner rather than later. I think we need someone who can come in and just hit the ground running, and I think we've all been waiting a while for that to happen.
Mr. Rich?
I think what Ms. Cummings said that really struck a nerve with me was come in and hit the ground running. What we need, and something that he even referenced, is looking at this as that final stretch as a superintendent. Now, what does that mean? That means that in a couple years or so, we'll be back here looking for another superintendent. But where our district is at that point in time would matter a whole lot on the job that he does, should he be the superintendent, and the impact he has on our central office staff, on building the next leader for Farmington while he's here. I think we need to look at what kind of an impact either of these candidates would have on our staff here in Farmington, and who would best be able to develop them into the leaders for not right now, but for the next couple years, and continuing that legacy of growth. So I think just with where I am, I'm looking at where we can go and what would be best for the district, both now and in the future.
Mr. Muckamel, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, you know, I think that they're both very good candidates, and they're very good people. That certainly is what came across to me. Very different personalities, different areas of strength. I think that in both of them would have to adapt to the scale of our district. They would have to adapt to us as a board. And, you know, we haven't always been cohesive, although I think we've done an excellent job over the last few months. As was mentioned earlier, you know, we are an impatient community. We hated academic excellence. And I think that the majority of people in the community, certainly that I've talked to, are kind of impatient to see that restored. So my analogy is like it's a sports team, and it's like, well, so, you know, it's like the Detroit Red Wings. So when are we going to be a Stanley Cup contender again? And so when I look at these two candidates, they have their certainly their strengths. With Dr. Herrera, it's certainly the systems and data and his whole approach, which actually I think would be well suited to a district of this size. And the charisma, if that's the right word, certainly the communication skills of Dr. Shivers is also, you know, very, very good. And I agree with the comment that she seemed to make a very quick connection with stakeholders. So, you know, for me, what it means is that, you know, doing a bit more of a deep dive into sort of ferreting out some of the comments and some of the finer things. And, you know, I think I'm also, the big picture for me is am I ready to make a commitment for 3 years to either one of these people? And I'm not sure about that. It's still a question.
Mrs. Williams.
So I'm torn as well, and I share a lot of what all of my colleagues had to say. When I think about Dr. Shivers, I like her very measured approach. I like that she appears to be a very good fit, and that's extremely important to me. We're not hiring for personality, but when I take a look at the qualifications that we were looking for in a candidate, being able to connect with our people is obviously something that's very, very important. I am, though, a little bit concerned that she may be a little too measured and too slow to act. And, you know, I get anxious and I realize that, you know, everything doesn't move as fast as I would like for it to. But that was a concern of mine. I also liked her focus on climate and culture and curriculum. I think those are really, really important areas. But again, I'm concerned that she may be a bit kind of complacent on the good data, right? So those were that's my summary of Dr. Shivers. Dr. Herrera is a very dynamic educator, and I think he would do very well, but I have some concerns there too as it relates to achievement. He mentioned that there were sort of 3 components that factored into it, one being obviously curriculum and instruction, and then 2 others that he talked about being out of our control. And I just have a fundamental difference of opinion there when it comes to learning, and I believe that you don't have to have an optimal home environment in order to be successful here, and that's at least my goal. And so, you know, I kind of struggle with that because I'm not satisfied with lowering our standards, and I'm not, you know, I know high achievement is possible, and so that's where my reservation is.
Yeah, I think that was about standardized testing, though. Just to
Okay.
clarify, I think that's what that statement, what the
Okay.
research says about what impacts standardized
Okay.
testing, but proceed.
So, I mean, I think my opinion is that I struggle, great candidates, but I am struggling because, you know, I don't want to feel like I have to give up something, and I feel like I am now because we didn't get candidates that were from neighboring districts. We didn't get candidates that had the same sort of high-performing goals and results. We didn't have candidates that were from larger districts. We didn't have candidates who have, demonstrated experience in the direction that we're trying to move in. That doesn't mean that their past experiences won't translate into that, but, I'm like an O for 4 here. And I think that's reflective of the same way you told us that, the same way we're investigating these candidates, they're going to be investigating us. And so we didn't get the pool of candidates that ticked any of those boxes for me. And that's my hesitation, that I think we got great candidates, but I would have loved to see that. And that's what's sort of causing me to pause here. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Rich?
I think one thing that was stated when we were very early on was, we're looking at people both reaching up, nobody coming down, but there's also no one making a lateral move.
Why would you?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that's part of why these boxes aren't being checked. Sometimes it's for a change that people do that, but otherwise, I don't see why people would. And I think it definitely makes it more difficult to make a decision when you're looking at people more reaching up for a different position.
It's and I'm feeling some responsibility if I didn't manage your expectations well. This is an incredibly risky job for somebody who hasn't been a superintendent before. Because if you fail in your first superintendency, chances of getting another one are slim to none, right? And so, when candidates look at those prospects, now an experienced superintendent who says, I've dealt with a board dynamic before, I've lived to fight another day, right? I survived that, and they have a track record they can fall back on, right? They can put themselves into a dynamic, especially for a district that, you guys have touched on this, but historically, if we were to turn the clock back not very far, this would be considered, cream of the crop. No doubt about it.
Yep.
So, if I'm paying attention, I think we haven't heard from you yet, Madam President.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I've labored. How many times have I called you, Donna? I've really struggled. I've taken this to heart for more than one reason. I was elected to a seat to represent the stakeholders that include everyone, including our students. Having lived in the system, I have a very different perspective, and I think I went into this with looking for something that, again, would move us back. I don't know if I want to say back in time, but back to that focus where we had strong vision and mission, and we were moving forward. And yes, we took a step back. In listening to all the stakeholder input, I don't think there is a clear-cut, strong candidate out there in what we received in our pool. I'll be real candid and say we got communication that said you guys need to start all over at the drawing board. I don't think that's any reflection of anything other than the times. As I attend my sessions at MASB, I'm learning there's not a lot of people that want to be superintendents. There's not a lot of people that want to stay as a superintendent, but yet I am weighing out what I know our system is, what's inside of our system, the expectations in our system. And I was hoping that I would feel really strong tonight, that there was a perfect fit, and I'm really, really conflicted. I'm not sure that we have a, for lack of better words, perfect, so I'm trying to look at a compromised. And I don't mean it in a negative, that just was not a positive way to say that. That's not what I meant by that. But I'm struggling to watch for the right match to move Farmington forward to where we can be for our students, for our community. And I don't know what the right answer is for that.
I think we have some
Oops,
other
I'm
folks
sorry.
waiting to speak.
Sorry, I'm thinking,
No,
and
no,
I'm
I'm with
thinking
you.
and
I'm sorry. I
processing
didn't
and
mean to
thinking.
kill the
Sorry.
emotion.
Mr. Johnson.
I want to take us back. None of us were on this board when Dr. Heisch was brought on. I believe he was brought on in a 4-3 vote. And from some folks may remember this, It was not, I don't want to use the term, he was not the clear, everybody's 7-0 on board. It was 4-3. I think we have to separate two things. There are things I like to do and I wish I can do when I was 25 years old, but I'm not 25 anymore. There's a certain reality that I have to have. My hair is not as long as it used to be. No comments, Ms. Smith. My weight isn't what it used to be, and I'm not as quick and swift as I used to be. I think what we're looking for, and I'm going to, Ms. Weems and Ms. Cummings mentioned this, and I think the rest of us have said this as well, is we want to get back to, go from good to great, okay? But I think we're looking for great in a system that we really need to focus on and say, where are we seriously right now? We have a lot of seasoned educators. We have a lot of folks that have been here for a while, but unfortunately, we haven't moved the needle. The needle is actually going in the wrong direction. The question we have to ask at this point is, can we stop the movement right now and move it forward? And if so, who can do that? And who wants to come to Farmington? This isn't the Farmington of years ago. I'm not saying that in a negative tone, just like I'm not the Terry Johnson of 20 years ago. None of us are who we were 20 years ago. We have to take a realistic look at ourselves and what we have here. And to, get a perfect candidate, I don't think it's going to happen. We have to look at who we are and who can fit into what we've got and who can move us forward. So I'm just going to say not making a decision, because these are the two that we are left with. We all agree they're good candidates, but I think we owe this community one of the two of them. And again, I wouldn't be disappointed with either one. I like one a little better than the other, but we've got to move this forward. And, unless we do that, again, we just have to take as you contemplate this, take a realistic view of where we are, not where we were years ago, not where we want to be 5 years from now. Where are we today, and who can we attract?
Mrs. Williams?
That's a great statement, actually. Who are we today, and who can we attract is really the question.
I just feel like I have to say something right now, which is like, listen, no matter what you do tonight, and I'm going to my grave with this one. Let's be very cautious about framing this as you got left at the bottom of the barrel, because that's just not the case here.
I agree.
I've seen some crappy interviews in my day, and that didn't happen here.
Right.
I've seen some crappy candidates in my day, and that didn't happen here. I saw two very smart people who know how to impact teaching and learning speak very intelligently about that, and have a backstory that supports that. Now, there may be some folks who love them. There may be some folks who hate them. There may be a lot of people scratching their heads saying, 15 years ago, these would not have been the finalists for Farmington Public Schools. Okay, now that we've accepted that reality, let's just be clear about the fact it's not about the fact that they're not capable. So I'm going to go ahead and surface the elephant in the room, which is the option here to go with an interim? Okay, because they might be wondering it. People are going to watch this later. I know a couple of you are wondering it. Here's the issue. The issue is this. When I think about presenting your stakeholder input data to you, there were two factors that were ginormous on the screens. One of them was the board dynamic, right? We talked about it at length, right? It's a work in process. The other thing was this district's desire to go back to that shining city on the hill, but in the context of a long-term vision, right? What is it that you're going to coalesce around and actually start to focus on and celebrate, right, to move things forward here? That's the thing I keep wondering about in the interim situation. What are you thinking? Are you thinking you're going to go to an interim for a year, and then what? Do you have the year? And this isn't me talking you out of it, honestly. It's more like, you know, Trustee Mukamal talked about urgency, right? That this is a district that has a sense of urgency about wanting to get back to those levels of achievement. And you have mentioned it as well. So I need to get my arms around, are you really thinking that's the better alternative?
I see lots of hands.
So,
Sorry. Go ahead, Mrs. Williams.
my question to you is how much of the board's dynamics over the past, let's call it 6 months, do you think influenced our pool of candidates?
I don't think it's about the last 6 months.
Okay.
I think it's about longer than that. And I don't think it's just about a board dynamic. I think that you have been in a media storm, right? So if you think about you and the districts around you, right? I mean, yeah, there's lots of issues. I'm not going to say there isn't, but there's also how that's amplified. And the other kind of issue with that is it doesn't do us any good to look back in that way, right? Mm-hmm. You guys have made a very concerted effort to refocus and try to work together more, you know, in the time that we have been doing this search. So I don't know that that's different in a year, even if everything has been unicorns and kittens, right? Between now and then. I mean, I need you to know that, candidly. Now, we can rethink things. We can say, hey, can we come up with more money? Are you willing to look at some things you didn't look at before? You know, like, because even this notion of how seriously do we regard out-of-state candidates? I'm not talking about the gentleman that we sat aside in the first interview, just to be clear. You know, how vigorously do we recruit from that? I mean, there's some of that, but that's all a different equation, and that's all time. And I'm not here to tell you not to take the time. I'm here to say, I need to understand what it is that you think is going to be different.
Mrs. Cummings?
Donna, I really appreciate your comments and guidance, and I agree. There is, in my opinion, no perfect candidate. No one's sitting on this board. Sorry, guys, no one's perfect. So I guess I would just question, then what are we looking for? I see two great candidates. And like I said, I'm conflicted. I think they're both great. I think either one could step in and work with us and work with our stakeholders. I also, I'll just share, I'm concerned with asking someone to serve as an interim. That's not a conversation I've had with anyone. I don't know if we have someone that's willing to take on that responsibility and work with us. And again, the message that sends to the community, I'm not sure what that message is, except we're not sure what to do. I think we have great talent in the district. I think we're very fortunate, but we posted the position. We had applicants.
Well, you didn't just post it. I mean, we've gone on record before of saying we were vigorous. This is
Yes.
not, if we had missed a mark here, I mean, you know me, I'll stand there and say, hey, we missed the mark. We didn't miss the mark on as far as the recruiting aspect of this.
Right. And I appreciate it. I think a lot of time and effort went into that end of it. So I don't feel like a stone was unturned. And if someone thinks there was a stone that was not unturned, I want to know about that. That's where I'm at with the process.
So I'm hearing that no stone was unturned.
Stone. And I just want to say, I personally made 29 calls to
Very select.
very selective, every district around here, assistant superintendents. I mean, seriously, talked to a lot of people. Yes, I talked to Dr. Shivers. I talked to a lot of people other than her as well. I want to say, too, as a superintendent for 24 years, you know, sitting in the chair, these were two very good candidates. I mean, I was very impressed. I thought they were the best two of the 7. I thought when I saw the 7, you know, we had 29 candidates. We looked at a lot of things and a lot of factors. I thought we did a great job on the process from the beginning, the board I'm talking about, and then the interviews. We saw 7 candidates, and there was no doubt in my mind that these were the best 2 candidates of the 7. And I can appreciate what you're talking about, you know, like, well, this one brings this one brings this, you know. My thing is, let's decide. I mean, this is your option. I don't know, obviously, Donna is going to speak for us in terms of it, but I'm just going to say, I don't think an interim is a good option at all. I really don't. And I don't think there's any reason why either one of these candidates couldn't move your district forward. They both have great track records. The references are great. Every single person I've talked to about them says they have great leadership skills and so on and so forth. And you guys have done some of your own calls. So from my point of view, there is no reason why one of them can't be the one that you guys can all fall in love with. And I know we can be all over the place on it, but they're both good candidates.
Sorry, Mr. Johnson.
I know this might be a little premature, but in the interest of time, I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Education extend a contract for the position of superintendent to Dr. Robert Herrera.
He had something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we can still make the
You
motion.
you can make the motion,
Support.
and then you've got support. Hang on.
And then we
Okay.
can have discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to extend a contract for Superintendent of Farmington Public Schools to Dr. Robert Herrera by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Cummings. Is there discussion? Mr. Rich?
I think a lot of what I had to say was said by Dr. Green. Looking at 2 great candidates that we had tonight when narrowing down from 29 to 7 to 2, of the 29 candidates that we had apply for this job, I think these are the 2 best that were there. I think if we look at an interim, I don't know, as Donna said, what changes in a year. Things could change in 3. But in this current landscape, what we can't do is who do we wish was in the pool? Was there someone that we overlooked, that didn't apply, that we want to extend this to? We can't be doing that. We have a pool of 29, and now we're down to the 2 best of those that applied for this job. And whatever caused people to apply or not apply, or to think about applying, that is their own business. But in looking at where this district is currently, right now, not much is going to change in a year of an interim. So that's all I have.
Mrs. Weems?
I agree. I think we have 2 very good candidates. I would agree with that.
Mr. Muckamel, I can't see if your hand's up. Do you have anything you want to add?
His picture isn't up.
The only thing is that the feedback that I've read and my own impression about Dr. Herrera, and now we're into the deep dive. I find, in fact, that his communication skills do need quite a bit of work. I question his time management. I noted his presentation tonight was 40 minutes, and I started clocking him after he started speaking. And frankly, he kind of came across in a very dry manner. And I don't know that, that to me is potentially problematic in dealing with different stakeholders.
Thank you.
No, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no discussion further, we will move to a vote. The vote is to extend a contract to Dr. Robert Herrera to serve as the next superintendent of Farmington Public Schools. Mrs. Smith, we need a roll call.
Ms. Weems. You want me to come back? I can come back.
Yeah, it would be better to come back.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Rich,
Yes.
Mr. Mukamal.
No.
I myself, no. Ms. Weems,
Yes.
Ms. Green,
No. We have 4 yes, 3 no.
So the motion
Motion
carries.
carries.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
I mean, this is live, right? So, although the motion carried, I'm going to ask you a question. Can you get your arms around
Absolutely.
a 7-0 around some kind of statement about your ability to support this person? Because he's not
100%.
going to be successful without all of you supporting him. No, nobody would be.
So, wait 1 second, Mr.
Sure.
Johnson. Part of our board guidelines are, when we make a decision, we stand behind whatever that decision is, whether it's what we voted for or not. And we will all embrace Dr. Herrera and welcome him to our system. And we will all work to help him be as successful as possible for the betterment of our students, our staff, and our teachers. So I can speak on behalf of everyone that I think we could have that, we'll have that commitment together as a team.
As
Mr. Rich.
we did with Dr. Heitch.
Mr. Rich.
I believe that what we voted on was to extend the contract. Don't we still have to vote on the
Yes.
acceptance of that as well, if it were to be accepted by Dr.
Absolutely.
Herrera?
Absolutely.
After
After
Yes.
negotiations of that contract.
Correct.
So your point is that there's an
we go.
opportunity
Yes,
to
sorry.
have a 7-0 vote.
Sorry, yes, that
in
was the
contract.
continuation of my
It's
point.
late, in case we're missing the
Yes.
nuances.
Yes.
And it's late, so thank you for pointing that out.
Yes, thank you, yes.
And
With-
if I can just ask, do you want, we worked on this contract together, remember? And a lot of times what we do at this point is we make the call and we talk about finances. I know it needs to be negotiated and things like that. And I did not send this contract to the candidates yet,
Okay.
even though it's ready to go. But we had talked about, is this on? I'm sure I'm
Yes.
on. Thank you.
Can't tell.
We had talked about 190 to 200, somewhere in that range, right? Is there any
Yeah, it was the big one.
sense of what you want to offer?
We also talked about the car and
Yep.
travel allocation.
Yep, we have all of this
Maintaining
in
the
here.
500. The other, we talked about professional organizations and growth, so I've done my homework on, should we have a budget around that? What are the top ones with that? Do we need to put that in, a limit in there, or does that?
What I would recommend at this point is that somebody be
Subcommittee.
identified on the board to be, Dr. Green's point of contact on this as he runs interference on it.
Okay,
The contract has to come back to the full board, a public vote, so they'll, nothing's gonna
Right.
move forward that isn't
When's
appropriate.
when's your next board meeting?
June
June
4th.
4th.
Next week.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
So we could get it.
So, yeah.
Might be
so-
tomorrow at the rate we're going.
I will be happy to serve in that capacity, but I think we need a collective opinion here on where we're going with the salary range.
Can I make a suggestion, Ms.
Yes.
Green? Ms. Weems, myself, and you are on the succession subcommittee, how about we, at some point within the next 24 hours, try and get a conference call, have a discussion, and go
Well,
from there?
Do you have a recommendation?
Yes, if I could just jump in here, we just need to make an offer. So it'll be negotiated, but I think we said 190 to 210, didn't we?
Yeah.
Was that it?
But I think he's at, I could be wrong, I think he's at 180 right now.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, how about if we offered 200? And everything else is ready to go. The only other thing was,
Why would we offer 200?
Why would we
because-
negotiate openly like this right now with the range?
well,
Well, the range is public.
The range is public,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, that's why I made the suggestion
Yeah.
that the subcommittee do this.
I think we should just go ahead and do it now, because otherwise we gotta come back to you, right? And would that have to come back to this?
It wouldn't have to come back to the
We
board.
already knew he had to be marketable, and he is moving, we'll have to move for locations, which I think.
well,
we'll have
I
to
guess my
discuss.
point of, we have the contract ready to go. We just need to insert the number that we want to offer. And generally, there's not a lot of negotiation, although, you could end up with that. But usually what happens is I'll call the candidate and say, this is what the board is interested. What do you think? And if it's reasonable, so why 200 as opposed to 190, for example, the bottom of the range? Because he has, 12 years of experience as a superintendent. He's already making 180, and so on and so forth. So you're trying to be in the ballpark of what
Fine with
would work.
Okay. George also said we
I
would
could
have
do
to
199.
I can do,
be marketable.
But it's up to the board. I mean,
No.
I'm wide open. I don't want to negotiate in public any more than anyone else does, but
Rick?
To be fair, I'm just saying this as it is. He would need to be rehired as he currently stands, being no longer the state-appointed CEO of the school district where he's at.
But technically,
Putting,
he's got a multi-year contract with them that they
So
have
he
to
could
pay.
hold them to it, correct?
He just doesn't, he has said he does not intend to hold them to it, which is
Correct.
something.
I would advocate we go to the 200.
I mean,
Anybody else discussion?
we could do 195. I mean, I don't think we should be at the bottom of the range is my only thought. Other than that, I'm wide open, and I would talk to him about it, and we would, and then I'd come back to you guys. I mean, basically,
fine it too, whatever you guys want to do.
I know in doing our homework for the contract, we knew we were
We were
probably gonna be
right-
about 200.
we were right in the ballpark.
It's fine.
Is that right?
Mhm.
All right, I'll work on
Everybody
it, and then
good?
I'll work with Pam, and then she can work with whoever.
I'll call you too.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to
Support.
adjourn.
Support, move, so moved.
Aye.
Okay.
Energy around